Hi, I'm Jason Miller with ForeFlight. We've had the pleasure of going to quite a few air shows and conferences over the years, and have gotten the chance to talk to a lot of people about how the iPad can be useful to pilots. So we decided to try to condense a lot of that knowledge into this one webinar here about iPad proficiency. It covers mostly general iPad topics, but also some ForeFlight Mobile specific functionality to get the most out of our application. So what we'll look at is a bit about how the iPad fits into a pilot's life, how the iPad hardware works, the operating system iOS and applications that you install on it or apps, how you pre-flight and fly with the iPad, and some best practices for using the iPad and apps. We'll also talk a little bit about additional resources to learn more about this. So what can pilots use an iPad for? Well, tons of pre-flight planning, researching airports, weather, routing, all of your charting, en routes, sectionals, plates, and all of the procedures that you're going to need for your flight. And what the iPad does, well, it's got a lot of real estate for looking at charts. It's really simple to use. It's always on, fast to turn on and off, and it's perfect for consuming content, which is something that pilots do a lot before flight and while flying. So what does an iPad mean to a pilot? Well, it really can change how you fly and how you prepare for a flight. It can become your constant companion and something that you really just don't want to fly without if you can avoid it. It makes you more current because data is so easy to update. You get to be much more productive, quick to find charts, and more confident that you can get to what you need when you need to. And through those things, it makes you safer. However, that comes with a big if. You need to be proficient with using the iPad and your applications. So a bit about the iPad itself. So of course it's made by Apple. It's almost 10 inches diagonal. It's a backlit display that supports multi-touch, which means these pinching and zooming gestures. The battery can last for up to 10 hours, but you're pretty safe assuming 7 to 8 hours of battery life on a full charge. It's very lightweight, so it works well in a flight bag. Comes in multiple sizes. We recommend the 32 gigabyte size, the mid-size. It has Wi-Fi capabilities, and if you get a 3G iPad, it can also have an internal GPS and a cell data capability to get information on the go. And all iPads run the iOS operating system that Apple creates. So there are a few differences between the iPad 1, the original one, and the iPad 2. The iPad 2 is a little thinner and lighter. It's a little faster. But other than that, they operate identically, and we support both. There are also two flavors of iPad in that there's a Wi-Fi only iPad and then one that also includes 3G capabilities. By getting the 3G iPad, not only do you add on the ability to optionally get a 3G data plan so you can get internet access when you are away from Wi-Fi connections, but it comes with an internal GPS as well. And the internal GPS can operate entirely independently of a 3G cellular data plan. That data plan is completely optional. So do you need an external GPS? Well, you do if you have a Wi-Fi only iPad. It does not have an internal GPS. But even with the 3G iPad that does have an internal GPS, there can be line of sight issues in certain aircraft. Maybe the iPad's not able to get enough signal based on where you've placed it in the cockpit. Or if you're flying high and fast, the iPad's GPS may not be very capable at keeping up. And in those situations, we recommend the external. And it's not a big difference in terms of accuracy between an external and an internal GPS. It's really more of an issue of whether it works or not. So if the internal GPS is working fine for you, stick with it. Maybe you get an external GPS as a backup that you keep in your bag, but it's entirely optional in that case. So there's a few external GPS options that are supported by the iPad. A plug-in option is the Bad Elf GPS. This runs off of the iPad battery, doesn't have a big impact on it. It's really easy to connect, but it is limited in where you can place it in the cockpit because it's hooked up directly to the device. And then the other options are Bluetooth or wireless enabled, and these have their own battery. They require a Bluetooth pairing, which is a simple little setup you need to do from time to time. But they offer much more flexible placement. You can put them up on the glare shield and so forth. And here we show the Dual, which is one of the wireless devices that we recommend. Any of these devices must be compatible with iOS, the operating system that runs on these Apple mobile devices. So older Bluetooth GPSs, if they don't explicitly say they support iOS, then they will not work with an Apple device. So, how does GPS work with the iPad? Well, it's very similar to how GPS works for your panel. The satellites are broadcasting the GPS signal, and these can be picked up by either an external GPS that you've purchased or the internal one in the iPad 3G. This position information is passed into the iPad operating system. iOS receives it, puts it into something that's internally called location services, and from there it goes out to any app that's running that requests GPS information, such as ForeFlight Mobile. So if you're pretty sure your GPS is working fine, but you can't see your position in a certain application, what you would want to do is go into the Settings application on your iPad, go to Location Services on the left side, and verify that the switches are turned on for not only location services at the top, but for any applications which you would like your GPS position to be provided to. So a bit about how you get apps or applications and how those are updated. It all happens in the App Store icon that comes pre-installed on the iPad itself. You run the App Store application to initially download an app like ForeFlight Mobile, but also to update any software updates we issue, which we tend to go every 6 to 8 weeks and put new software features out. When it comes time to update the actual aviation data that you want to consume, you run the application itself and download your charts and airport information. So let's talk a bit about pre-flight activities. Those involve updating all of your charts, making sure your data has been downloaded, reviewing all the airport and weather information you need, and actually planning out your flight, briefing it, and filing it. To keep your data current, use the Downloads view within ForeFlight Mobile. This is where you select the regions that you fly in, and then download all of the chart data that pertains to those regions. So that's sectionals, en routes, airport information, and so forth. Once you've downloaded them, they'll have a green check mark beside them, and anything that's been downloaded here will be available for use in flight. To check that your charts and plates are saved properly onto the device, it's pretty easy to do. You can go into the iPad settings, turn on airplane mode, and that takes the iPad offline and allows you to verify that all of your charts are visible, that you can zoom in nice and tight and pan around, as well as all of your terminal procedures and airport data load properly. So to get the information you need about airports and weather and so forth, we have various views in ForeFlight Mobile. Airport information is all of the fundamentals, all the facility information, runway details, procedures. For weather, again, all of the standard data items, METARs, TAFs, winds aloft, various forms of imagery. The radar and satellite, for instance, can be viewed against your route in the Maps view. And you can even get a text briefing from DUATS. And when it comes time to determine what route of flight you'd like to take between your two airports, there's a variety of ways to build up the route in ForeFlight Mobile. You can just type it in like ATC gives it to you in the very top of the view here. That can include airways and departures and arrivals. You can look at recently cleared ATC routes for your departure and destination points, as well as just use touch planning by holding your finger down on the map to create a custom route. Before you go fly, it's also a great idea to get organized. So we have the capability of setting favorite airports and routes, as well as preloading the procedures that you think you'll probably need to reference in flight. Let's say you expect to shoot an ILS when you get to your destination. You can load all of those up into the Plates tab for quick access later. When it comes time to file, we have a file and brief view inside ForeFlight Mobile. This makes it really easy to fill out the standard FAA information in order to file IFR or VFR flight plans. We don't support canceling or amending a flight plan. As far as canceling goes, you can just allow a flight plan to expire in the system and it will disappear on its own. For amending, we basically recommend you file another flight plan, and if it happens to be at the same time as a previous one, just make sure ATC knows which flight plan you'd like to activate. So once you're at the airport, there's a few tasks you want to complete. First is an all-important last check of the weather. Make sure that hasn't changed dramatically enough to affect your plans. You'll need to configure your iPad settings for flight, and also set up any of the iPad hardware or accessories in the aircraft. Weather check can be accomplished through either Wi-Fi or a 3G data signal if those are available. And it makes sense to review a lot of the important information like any thunderstorms and so forth in case you do need to file a new flight plan or make a no-go decision on your flight. And let's take an aside here and talk a little bit about the radios in the iPad. When you're on the ground, you can receive GPS information as well as use either the Wi-Fi or 3G data connection to get information from the internet such as charts or weather. However, once you're in flight, the Wi-Fi and 3G data connections will no longer be available, so the only information you will have are any charts and airport information you downloaded while you did have an internet connection. Additionally, if you have a supported device for in-flight weather, such as the mobile link, you'll be able to get weather information in flight once that device is hooked up and operating. The GPS will still continue to function even when you've turned off Wi-Fi and cellular data. So, configuring the iPad itself before taxi. This really depends on the type of iPad you have and more importantly the GPS that you're going to use for your iPad. And a quick note on airplane mode. That's a switch you can find in the iPad settings, and essentially that disables all the internal radios, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 3G, including the internal GPS. You always want to turn Wi-Fi and 3G off for in-flight usage unless you happen to be using a Wi-Fi device that's in the cabin with you, and turn Bluetooth off as well unless you need it to save battery. So if you're using a plug-in GPS like the Bad Elf, the only setting we need to set is airplane mode on. That disables all of the radios for us automatically and allows us to maximize battery savings while still being able to get a GPS fix in flight. If you're using a Bluetooth GPS, then you can turn airplane mode on, go into the general section of settings, and manually reactivate Bluetooth. Then make sure the device is connected. If you're using the internal GPS in the iPad 3G, you do not want to turn airplane mode on. You want to leave that off, and you want to manually turn off Wi-Fi, cell data, and Bluetooth. Another feature of the iPad is the rotation lock, and this can be configured in the iPad wide settings to be toggled on and off by the hardware switch on the side of the iPad. Additionally, some applications provide a lock switch on certain views, such as seen here on a plates view in ForeFlight Mobile. For night operations, the key is to preserve night vision. The iPad dimmer itself typically won't get dim enough for night use, so many applications, including ForeFlight Mobile, provide additional dimming capabilities. The way to utilize this is to double tap the home button at the bottom of the iPad, and then swipe all the icons off to the right to reveal a brightness slider. Turn this all the way down to get minimum brightness for the iPad itself, and then go into the application and further reduce brightness. That can be done in the settings section of ForeFlight Mobile with the slider at the top right. Additionally, you can set the iPad to allow inverting of colors, and you do that in the general section of iPad settings. Underneath accessibility, go to the triple click home option, set it to white/black, and then anytime you tap the home button at the bottom of the screen 3 times, the colors will invert. This is especially handy for plates. And lastly, before taxi, you want to set up your hardware. That may involve setting up a charger, positioning accessories in the cockpit, or mounting the iPad on a yoke, for instance. Just make sure that your flight controls are free and correct. Now, on to flying with the iPad. You should give a little bit of thought about how your instrument scan will be affected by having a tablet in the cockpit. It can provide some very important information, but obviously the panel has more important information, so it's a good idea to integrate all of this into your scan appropriately. Apps like ForeFlight Mobile provide a lot of functionality while in flight. It's a great way to view all of your charts, get GPS timing information, as well as deal with any ATC reroutes that may occur. But in order to make use of these features, you really need to understand how to get to the different parts of the application quickly without a lot of thought. That's where practicing on the ground really helps out. Now, like any electronic device, the iPad can have failures. Of course, the battery could run out. If there's no onboard charger, you need to be able to go back to some sort of backup, either another device or maybe even paper. The iPad also has a protective mode it will enter if it gets too hot. This is a rare event, but it does mean you have to shut down the iPad for a few minutes to allow it to recover. If you have your iPad in a case or it's sitting up in the sun on the glare shield, that could certainly make this overheating problem more of an issue. If the app itself seems to be the source of the failure, a relaunch is probably a good idea. You do that by tapping the home button to exit the app, double tapping the home button to bring up the list of recently used applications. Hold down on the application you'd like to restart until they all shake, and then tap the little red button to close it out. Then you can relaunch the application. Additionally, you may just want to reboot the iPad, which just involves holding down the sleep button until you can power it off, and then starting it up again. So if you'd like to learn more about the iPad and ForeFlight Mobile, it's a good idea to really start all that on the ground. Get with somebody that knows the iPad. If you can't do that, at least find a user guide for your application. To get more information about ForeFlight, please send us an email or visit our website, and you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter.